Hey everyone, James Azar here with the brand new furbished CISO Talk podcast. It is our inaugural episode. I've taken content that was on our old channel and dedicating it where it's just practitioner talk all day, nothing else. That's all you get to listen to. A new interview format style. Thanks to our focus group out at RSA. We've listened, we've done it. I've got a very, very special guest for our inaugural episode. You guys have seen him before on our virtual summit with our friends over at SNAC. Greg McCord, wearing his black hat shirt, supporting Black Hat. Greg, how's it?
Hey man, it's going on, man. It's been an interesting last few weeks since the last time we chatted, but happy to say that we're securing the world just a little bit better than we were yesterday and the day before. So super excited.
It's a really super exciting time, I think, for a lot of reasons. If you're smart and you're good in security, and we'll definitely find out about our audience, will definitely find out more about that here in a moment. But you're able to use this crisis to really increase your awareness and your influence within the organization. You're able to really step up and show leadership and really kind of demonstrate to maybe the CEO why the CISO should be his best friend and not the CIO.
Mm-hmm, exactly. And I have a nice little rap quote for that.
Shoot.
Maybe a little bit later.
No, give it. I want to hear it right now. What's the rap quote now?
So he's one of my favorite rappers, is Lil Dicky. So he was mentioning, which rapper he was? Oh, it was a professional rapper. And essentially what he says is, okay, well, my name's Lil Dicky, professional rapper. He's talking to Snoop Dogg, and he says, I want to do this whole thing different. Traditionally, people have been doing the job the same kind of way for a long time. You don't know if it could be working even better. It fits this perfectly.
Fits amazing. As we're in this pandemic and states are slowly starting to open up again, right? They're now opening like barbershops and nail salons. For us here in Georgia, people are saying it's the end of the world. Colorado's opening up just like us, and no one's saying it's going to end the world in Colorado. I guess people are so stoned in Colorado, they don't really care. It's like, he's opening. What do you mean? He's opening the state up. Oh, I can go get my hair done. Who cares? I'm just smoking pot and ordering Uber Eats. And I'm starving. Let's get some Funyuns, man. Funyuns and Cheetos. Yeah. And Funyuns and Cheetos are like the ultimate stoner snack.
No comment.
No comment. We'll keep this HR appropriate for today. So, Greg, kind of having you back is great. You and I have spoken, I think a few times since our last podcast, and I absolutely love your energy, love your insight. And I really wanted to kind of take this chance to really give you your own stage to introduce yourself, talk a little bit about how you got into cybersecurity, a little bit about your background, your education, if that counts, and any mentors that really brought you to the level where you're at today, because you are the global head of information security for CalAmp. And just tell our audience a little bit about CalAmp, because I don't think a lot of people know what CalAmp really is.
So CalAmp by itself deals a lot around the logistical space in terms of transportation, secure data analytics for a lot of our customers. And these are large customers that do a lot of the delivery, which I won't say their names because I didn't get that approval. Darn it. And what they deliver packages and throughout the United States and throughout the globe. So we do a lot of that fleet optimization, transportation optimization, providing secure communication for them. But we're better known for one of our not recent, but 3 years ago, an acquisition we made, LoJack. So we also have stolen vehicle recovery, which I find also fascinating technology. And that's that's really part of our portfolio. So cool stuff. Great technology. We're in the IoT space. If you want to go even higher than that, abstract it out. And it's a Wild West, a lot of fun. I already lost my hair like the first month. I'm kidding. It's been gone for a while.
It seems like it just dropped out. Ultimate joke though is when I was in college, the only year I ever went to college, I was with my roommates. And I used to love to prank my roommates. Like before it was cool to do it and put it on Facebook. And I took one of my... And yeah, so I had a really good friend. His name was Ryan. And I won't say his last name. I don't want to embarrass him. And Ryan had beautiful hair. He didn't have my marine buzz cut kind of hair. You know, like you and I, we see guys with beautiful hair. We look at them in awe. We just go, man, I wish I could just run my fingers through like a healthy, thick set of hair. We can't. We just...
Pre-COVID though, but definitely not now.
Definitely not now. And I emptied out his shampoo and I put Nair inside and just stood outside a shower and heard him scream as hair was just coming. He had missing patches of hair all over his scalp. He wore a beanie for like 2.5 months. He looked like Kyle from South Park.
I'm not going to say that my group of friends and I never did that. There are, I won't tell you where they did it, but it happened. And I know that I also did a test, and where that hair is supposed to be no longer exists. It's been gone forever. So no, it's not up here. That's stress.
I was going to be like, wow, that Nair really does work magic on your scalp. Maybe that's why Ryan hasn't spoken to me in like 15 years.
Probably not. He's like, Rogaine, please, Rogaine. No.
Just go to Turkey and get a hair implant. They're really popular there. So tell us before we go completely off track. We're recording this. It is a Friday, folks. And this is our first episode, so just bear with us as we banter a little bit. But I think a lot, you know, as we kind of go through this interview, we do like to banter a little bit, and that's quite okay. I think most of the feedback I get is always people love our sense of humor and banter. We don't just want to be a bunch of, you know, suit-ridden. If you wanted to be a suit-ridden guy, you wouldn't be in security. You'd probably go be a CFO or a COO or a CEO or something.
So I'm glad I didn't wear my jacket this time. Thanks.
I'm glad you didn't either. First time you wore a jacket, I was like, wow, everyone's really dressing up for this. I'm in my black t-shirt. I'm wearing a hoodie today.
A hoodie.
And that's only because I'm in my basement. It's a bit chilly in Georgia. It's been raining. And I'm wearing my Wounded Warrior Project hoodie. So for those looking to contribute to a charity, Wounded Warrior Project, really awesome people, awesome folks, just amazing. And donate there. Please support them, because they support the people who come back and really are left with nothing. They may not have any family left. They come back suffering from injuries and trauma that really changes the course of their lives, and they could definitely use the support, and Wounded Warrior Project is there to do that. Having now said the Wounded Warrior Project promotional here early on, 8 minutes into our interview, I'll now kick it back to you so you can tell us about your background, Greg. And how you got started in cyber.
So how I got started, like most in the information security space or cybersecurity space, I started off on IT. Very technical background, me personally. But even before that, I was a hardcore gamer. So I'm like, okay, well, I'm playing on computers, playing all these video games, you know, mid-90s, you know, late 80s video games, which are, you know, fantastic. But I was like, I got to the time where I needed to go to school. And I'm like, well, I don't know what to do. I don't want to be an accountant. Even I did study that a little bit. And I don't want to be all these other things because, you know, it's not gaming. It's not playing on computers. I'm like, well, I'll find it. Then they called it, what the heck did they call it? I forgot what it was. But it was essentially IT. Then I immersed myself in the networking, and then I saw a lot of fun in trying to find out what people are doing. Meaning, like, how are they getting into the networks, and how are they getting out of the networks? Like, where's my data going? So I always thought that to be fascinating. So that was about, give or take, 20 years or so ago. And kind of my passion, I kind of hit on it. And I always thought that the internet was truly fascinating to me. It's like, and the ways that people use it. And I'm trying to talk about the good things, of course, not the 50% of what it's used for today. But, you know, I always thought it was a great avenue for information sharing. And I mean, personally, I always thought the internet should be free to some extent, right? But that also comes with its own baggage. So, and kind of some mentors, like what really flipped that switch for me to get me out of the IT space and to something to protecting data and not just manipulating it. one of my good friends nowadays, he was my mentor at the time, Reza Solari. He works for Pacific Life Re out in the UK. He's their BISO. So he's the one that, he showed me kind of that world of InfoSec and cybersecurity and said, hey, like, here's what the differences are. And you're already doing it. Now expand upon that and take the world as your canvas, so to speak. So him and I were great friends. We speak almost on a daily basis, even to this day. But then once I've gotten out of gotten out of IT in the cybersecurity space, I had to get an education to say that I could do InfoSec because, some companies want to see the paper and a certification like a CISSP, and we got stories about CISSPs. But
join
so
the
you
club.
where each and every one of us is very unique. Anyway, I have a bachelor's, and yep, IC squared.
That is if people want to save the environment, get rid of this book.
I don't think I read the book though. Anyway, yeah, I got a bachelor's in computer science. I got, and I'll try not to give myself too big of a head here, a master's of information security and assurance, and then I've got another master's for MBA for executives. And I think, and I'll kind of explain a little bit later too, is like, why did I go that path? Because one is kind of a broad scope in anything that deals with data, because I've been talking about data for a lot now. That's why I'm in the company I'm in today. It's about data and how to better improve kind of what that means. But that's what the first degree was about. But then I said, well, I need to get something on the books that is information security driven. And then that's where I got the master's in information security and assurance. And then the MBA for executive is to work on, well, now I know all this technical stuff. Now, how do I talk to others about it? Because I'm sure that they don't want to talk in ones and zeros when all they want to know is, are we secure?
Well, and executives want to know bottom line, right? Like, how much risk are we dealing with? What does it mean to our organization? And, 3-4 years ago, the conversation used to be, how do CISOs properly communicate with the board and with executive leadership? I think that conversation's long gone now. It's now about it's not about how you communicate with the board or executive leadership anymore. It's about how do you look at your risk, how do you communicate that within the organization, and how do you measure your overall organizational security? Right.
And I will challenge the kind of the board piece there a little bit though, because when you join an organization, let's say in an executive capacity or you lead a department, you still generally have like the first 100 days, right? You got to figure out what's going on. What do I need to do for the next 6 months? Yada, yada. But the first time you interact with the board, that is your first impression. And what do we call that in the MBA world? First impression bias.
Right.
It's called bias for a reason, because if you go in a negative way, it's always going to be negative. When you go positive, it'll be positive until you go negative again. So you've got that one impression. So the reason I talked about the MBA is I want to get through that first impression. I want to be able to show my technical chops, but I want something meaningful to the board and say, hey, our risk score today is, I don't know, a 4. But then I get the chance to explain it. And I said, well, this is based on a set of, these criteria that everyone else is measured against, and so is information security. And then they'll start to ask questions. It opens up questions, and you can start to dive a little bit deeper. But I think to your point, that now that you've kind of got the ears open, you've talked about risk. You've talked about what this really means to the organization. You've talked about materiality. It's like, how much is it going to cost to move a risk medium, so on and so on. Now you're talking to dollars and cents. Like, if your CFO is like, oh crap, it's going to cost this much. Your IT guy in the room or gal is going to be saying, okay, well, now I need to implement a new technology because we found all this risk. Yep. And then your head of engineering is going to be, oh, cool. How do I add that to the pipeline? That's a lot of work. But for a CISO, that's a great spot to be, because now you've become the security evangelist or the teacher. And the whole intent to teach in information security is make sure we're doing the secure best practices from the beginning and not at the end. They shouldn't wait until you get to the board to say, hey, I've got a critical risk. And the board's going to say, they're going to turn around and say, what have you guys done to fix it? So it's moving that needle, moving the dial to where it should be.
Yeah, too often that conversation is just horrendous, and trying to get that, your first conversation with the board matters. And your due diligence in that first 100 days are even more important. Developing those relationships, getting into the second and third layer. So many times I speak to our peers, and the one common kind of piece is they're trying to develop these relationships, but they're taking things at face value. And you always know there's the underbelly and underlayer. You got to find it as quickly as possible so that you can start to address that underbelly without embarrassing anyone, without making enemies. That's not the point. But the point is to really just be able to kind of know how to do your job. And speaking of that, let's talk a little bit about leadership. I think there's an inherent amount of discussions around leaderships of CISOs. I think especially with this COVID-19 crisis that put a lot of people at home, instead of managing a team in your close quarters, in your SOC, in your fusion center, you're kind of managing everyone remotely. But before we get into that real quick, what are some of the key skills and qualities you look for when you're looking to hire someone to join your team?
Well, I think the obvious one is obviously going to be those technical skills. Like, do you know your IT stuff, like your OSI layer? Like, describe that to me. Walk me from layer 1 to layer 7. Go. And walk me kind of describe a data flow path for me. Like, somebody's getting into the network, something's leaving the network. Describe that to me. I also like to ask programming questions. Like, what's your favorite programming language? And tell me how you use it on the day-to-day basis. And most people are like, well, why do I need to know a programming language? Aren't I just going to manage a tool and a UI? And UI for those is a user interface. No, I need to try to get you to understand that in this space, you need to think like the bad guy or the hacker. You need to think like them. So most of those don't care about OSI layer. They don't care about your programming language. I just need to get an understanding of where you are technically if we're proficient. And me asking about how you get in and how you get out. Well, when you start thinking about terms like attack simulation, which I'll talk about here in a bit too, you're trying to get an understanding. It's like, what's that low hanging fruit that, opened the door for them to go in and then move laterally to go across your network. So how can I get an understanding of how you understand that? So I got to ask those different kinds of questions. And then I've got a fun troubleshooting one, and that's just tell me how to make a peanut butter sandwich. So, and if somebody answers, well, there's bread, peanut butter, and that's it. Like, fail, epic fail.
So the right answer is you open the bread bag, take out 2 slices of bread.
Okay.
Take the peanut butter out the cabinet, right? Okay. Or wherever you store your peanut butter, the pantry. Yeah. Take a knife out the drawer, put the knife in the peanut butter, mix it. Lay out the 2 slices of bread. Take the knife, put it open the peanut butter can. Right, the peanut butter can's already open. Sorry, because I mixed the peanut butter. Take out the knife, stick it, rub it, put it together. Cut off the crust if you're not a crust guy, or cut it in the middle if you're giving it to your kid.
There we go.
And then put it on a plate and serve it.
Yeah. And that's the information I want to hear, right? I want to hear is like, okay, are they allergic to peanut butter? You didn't ask that one, right? Or like, do you like chunky peanut butter? Do you like creamy peanut butter? I mean, it's an interesting question because.
But you're saying make me a peanut butter sandwich, right? Yeah. So do you feel like your standard's a little too high?
It could be. Well, it's not. There's not one right answer to kind of go with that. I just want to understand kind of what their thought process is.
Like how they process. How do they problem solve to that specific, something as simple as making a sandwich? Yeah.
And have you ask questions along the way, which is kind of what I'm trying to get to, right? So yeah, I make a peanut butter and jelly, or I make a peanut butter sandwich. Like, how do I make it? And it's like, well, does it matter the type of bread I use, or does it matter the type of peanut butter? And then you mentioned some key points, which means you've already asked the questions, which I'm like, perfect, right? So I would have been, okay, good, he's got it, right?
Yeah. So. And it's okay. I mean, when you look at skill wise, right, beyond the technical skills, right. What qualities do you look for?
I look for, I don't want to say it's a specific quality, but I look for ambition. I look for the want to do better. So other questions are, Like, okay, I want to do better in my career for X, Y, and Z, and here's how I intend to be in 5 years. And then I might say, okay, well, how can I help you get there? Which would be my follow-up response. Yeah, it's an interview, but you're also interviewing me. Like, you want to come work with, myself and my team. So I want to see a lot of those soft type of skills. I want to see those qualities. Can you have a conversation with me? I'm going to be leading you into this fight. Do you have that perseverance? Do you have that ambition to want to do the job? And if, above 100% when you need to, because cybersecurity is a 24/7 role. And I know HR says, well, we work from 8 to 5. I'm like, not an InfoSec, you don't. It's 24/7. So expect that phone to ring.
Expect that phone to ring, and expect to be on call, and expect to have to be a problem solver, and an efficient one at that. And there's an inherent challenge for people to comprehend that.
Right. So when somebody says, I'm just going to manage UI, well, remember those other questions I asked about IT stuff, engineering stuff, those other things? You need to understand the underpinnings of your own environment. I'm asking broad questions, but once you get in, you'll see, right? You're going to see all the underpinnings, like all the programming layers. Do you understand, the difference in white space, injection, all the different types of stuff you're going to have to understand when you're threat hunting? Somebody's in, now go find them. Oh, it's fun stuff. I love it.
Yeah. So many, I ask a question that I think really helps me understand if the person has a passion for security or not. Tell me about a breach you studied and why specifically that breach, and what did you take out of it? And I can't tell you how many people, and I can't tell you how many people look at me like stare blankly and then just, well, let's talk about the Travelex ransomware. And I'm like, you're just pulling out a headline you read this morning. Okay, so what about that ransomware? What were the TTPs of that ransomware? How did they get in? And then they just look at you really kind of awkward, and that's when I know I'm being BS'd. And that's when I know this person's not in security for the passion. He's in it for either the money, or it's just a job. It's a 9-to-5 for him. And based on the role, you can, at least for me, I can decide whether or not I want to take that person. Right? Some roles you want a 9-to-5 person.
You do. You absolutely do. Like an analyst role is somebody in there that's just, looking at the data, providing, outputs. Right? Great. We need more of you. But in some roles, we need that, extreme technical person, but I need him to be able to talk to at the same time.
Yeah, you need that passion, that zest, that constant desire to want to improve. When you think of the skills, what type of skills do you think security leaders need to have in order to successfully lead their teams? So you as a head of InfoSec, of global InfoSec, or CISOs or others, I mean, all these, what skills do you think security leaders really need to have?
Well, I think first and foremost is the soft skills. You got to be able to talk to others, whether it be in your swim lane or others. And you've got to be able to communicate with your team on a daily basis. Now, what do I mean by communicate to your team? Some folks like to have one particular management style, and others like, and they stick to that. There's a command and control, there's a coach, there's a mentor. There's several different types of management styles you can have. I think as a leader, you've got to be able to switch off between different management styles at different times. Like COVID-19 is a wonderful example, terrible scenario, but wonderful example of how you can change management styles. You've had to be more empathetic, because now you have folks at home that are under extreme emotional stress. So how do you deal with that? Command and control is not going to help you. Make the person more other unintended consequences, which I won't talk about here. Because emotional stress opens up a whole new can of worms for any leader in this environment. I mentioned perseverance. I think that's absolutely key. You're going to have to work with other folks in the organization that may not see security the same way you do. So you have to be able to persevere, be patient, and work with those individuals and continue to teach. Be the teacher and teach security, and work with everyone there. And your project also may not go as planned. So that's where perseverance and patience kind of kicks in there as well. Going back to being the teacher, like talking about risk. Like half my job throughout the day is a business relationship manager, or in other words, a security evangelist. So I'm preaching about security. I'm talking about security, but I want to teach it. I can say what I want all day long, but teaching it, making it meaningful to somebody is going to go much farther than just saying, well, this is a risk. You need to take care of it. To them, it's like, oh, great. Well, here's InfoSec again. Hey, here's the Ministry of No. Well, we don't need any of that. What we need to do is be the business enabler, be there with them, guide them through this process, and make sure that we protect the organization.
You brought up a great thing here, and I'm going to transition off of that. So how does a CISO become an enterprise-wide leader? And what skills outside of security do they need to possess? Because you just brought up a great thing, and without digging too deep into it, but the Ministry of No, oh, here comes the guys that send me that phishing test, that make me take that 30-minute boring online training, and then I have to go and talk to my boss about clicking on a link and what does that mean for the organization, and so much more. So how does a CISO really become an enterprise-wide leader, in your opinion?
Well, the enterprise-wide leader has got to be able to take all that information, understanding. It goes back to your earlier comment when we talk about learning. So it's about the relationships, right? So going back and chatting with everyone in each department, every silo could be in your organization as well, and understanding their concerns. Because the reason why most CISOs get into this Ministry of No business is because, hey, I found a risk and I'm getting fed up about it. I want to send this email out with your boss, and you're supposed to fix it. So now that's kind of put the stigmata on you and your team. Like, oh, great, here we go. Here's Greg again, and here's InfoSec.
Here's Chatty right? Betty. Here's Tattletale Betty. Snitches get
here's
stitches.
Another one. Yeah. And, some folks, you're just going to have that in your organization, and you're never going to win, right? But understanding that and knowing what those gotchas are with each individual is paramount to how you're going to, grow that program and make it succeed in the future. You've got to be able to work with others. So just, that's top. You've got to be able to work with others. You got to be able to, speak their language too. I brought up the CFO piece, like speaking the numbers game. Like, what does it mean? What is risk materiality? What is the return on control? Like, what are those things?
What's a 4 risk score mean to the company from a bottom line perspective? If an event happened, which you're at a 4 risk score instead of a 10, what does that really mean to the company, to its insurance policy, to its premiums, to its performance, to its shareholders? It's like you said, you have an MBA in business, and that's so important. I think more CISOs need to go down that route, because I feel like that's how you start to understand business. I remember early on in security, listening to, being at different events and listening to a lot of these conversations. The main kind of concern, or the main thing a lot of people spoke about, was a lot of times CISOs understood security but didn't understand business, didn't understand how the company made money, didn't inherently understand how the company operated, how different teams operated. And so they were always at a disadvantage because they were so security focused that's how they became the Ministry of No. Mm-hmm. So do you feel like your business background, taking that MBA, really helped you excel in that department?
I think it presented a fantastic opportunity for anyone in information security. And what I mean by that is, yes, I'm gonna do those things. I'm gonna learn how to talk with others in the organization. I'm gonna talk with another couple of groups, and that's marketing and sales. And this is where the opportunity presents itself. You now have an opportunity to sell your information security team and or security data to others outside of your organization.
Right.
Where you found critical vulnerability, you must patch it within our patch policy. Yay, fun, right? And then trying to get the respective teams to remediate or mitigate, or file a risk acceptance. But now you have an opportunity to say, well, this is all the stuff I'm doing with this data. How can I sell that to our customers? And I think that's a fascinating proposition. And then you build your subscription model around that. And then not only does your cost center become not a cost center, now it's a revenue center. So yet another business enabler, I think, for the organization. If we can get that in front of the boards, my fellow CISOs, man, that's fantastic. I'd love to hear the story.
It's absolutely fantastic. I think when you go and you say, hey, we're generating this much revenue, we're doing this much stuff. We had a conversation, I think, a while ago. I think the first time I had Mark Hopt, he's the CISO for DataBank, on the show. Okay. We were talking about how in the data center game, the CISO is not only responsible for security, they're also pretty much a walking salesperson. Every company that wants to use a data center is sending their CIO or CISO to go and figure out what security measures are being used and what are they responsible for and what are we responsible for in the environment of a data center. And there's as everyone transitions to the cloud now, and people have to understand clouds is essentially data centers, folks.
Somebody else's data center.
Yep. You're using Amazon's, Microsoft's, Google's, DataBank, whoever. And so that inherently has to do that. Kind of transitioning a little bit from leadership to security. Mm-hmm. What aspect of security and part of your security program do you spend the most time on? And why specifically that portion of it?
Depends on the time of day, but like in my role today, it's really the business relationship management or security evangelism. When I publish things within the organization, when I'm part of a program is rolling out, or XYZ, we found this, we found that, I've got to be able to go in front of each one of those leaders and evangelize, why, teach, those types of things. So I spend a majority of my day doing that. But when proverbial thing hits the fan, well, my day changes immediately, and pens and papers are down. I'm focused on, okay, what's going on? What is this, a breach? Did the data get out? How do I make sure that doesn't become public news, or does it need to? Right? It's because the environment's much different today than it was 20 years ago. Now you have to publicly disclose some of that information. I've been fortunate enough that we haven't had a scenario like that, and I hope no one on this call tries to make that happen. But so far we've been good. Knocking on wood.
Me too. I think the fact is, I think data breach notification is problematic, based also on the legal landscape of how you have to report it per state, per attorney general. The cost of it is just overwhelming. There's now a federal data notification bill that was written by Senator Portman, I believe.
Really? Okay.
I can send you. Do you want me to send you the link?
Oh yeah, please, yeah. Because I know there's SEC reporting. There's CCPA's got its own reporting mechanisms. Same with GDPR.
So each
country's got their own. So,
I think the one aspect in the U.S. that Congress actually needs to get off their tail, outside of just bailing businesses out right now in a time where we need to help companies, is on this cyber aspect of it, with having a federal privacy law and a federal data notification law that overrides state law, that allows you to go and if it's a report to the FTC, report to the FTC. If it's report to the FCC, whoever, FAA, I don't care.
Drop down list. Yeah, just have a drop down list, and just here's a form here's how you report to this one. And you fill in the form,
and let the feds deal with it. Let them be the lead, and so forth is needed desperately, because the cost of data breach notification is expensive. And it increases the cost of a cyber attack. In fact, in one survey I saw, a predominant amount of businesses, the reason small businesses fail from a breach isn't the reputational harm. It's the data breach notification costs. They'd rather go bankrupt than go pay a lawyer, $300,000 to go notify all their customers of a data breach. And that's minimum $300,000. I mean, we saw with the city of Atlanta, they were paying, they paid a retainer of $650,000 to their legal team to start working on that breach, and that was a ransomware attack.
I mean, but it's true. I mean, it's 100% true, right? And if I had any statisticians on the line, you said, "Oh, I can't believe you said 100%." But yeah, but it's a testament that it's a fact that you're going to spend a ton of money on breach notifications, and there's fallout to you internally. Yeah, we made this law so we can notify your consumers of a breach, but you can nearly bankrupt a company doing so.
Right.
And then conversely, somebody might say, "Well, shouldn't you protect your stuff to begin with?" I'm like, "Well, risk is ever evolving. You have to give us a chance."
Risk is ever evolving. We saw that with the Citrix thing earlier this year, right? I mean, so many large enterprises use Citrix. So many were impacted by that. So if all of them suffered a breach, do you go after them or do you go after Citrix? Who's responsible?
Right. It changes the landscape because and it depends on the regulation you're talking about too, because regulations say you can literally go after every single person who had your data in that chain.
Correct.
Wow. Right. And how impactful is that? And now I'm pretty sure there's some out there because we're sue happy, right? That they're actually doing that and they're making a ton of money off that. And like, why do I need to get a job when I could just sue people for the rest of my life?
Right. I mean, let me just go fill out my data in every single company that is going to suffer a breach, and let me just wait for my data to get somewhere and sue them. And I think after Equifax, I think people realized that consumers ain't getting crap, and the lawyers made all the money on that one.
Oh, and it was hilarious how the website they set up was, phished anyway. It's just, oh my God, that was great.
So many lessons to learn from the Equifax breach. So many to take in and just, it's the ultimate playbook. So kind of looking at security projects, what security projects did you enjoy working on the most? I mean, have you done any implementation or any cool security stuff where you go, I'm really proud of this and it was a lot of fun to do it?
I think one of my favorite implementations was implementing a CASB type solution. Uh-huh. So how do you integrate that into your desktop? Well, I don't think too many people are using desktops anymore. Your laptop, your mobile devices, and how do you get it to work without hindering the business? How do you get that to work without stopping operations or protection? It was a lot of work on the back end, but it was fun to see that finalized. Like, look, I've got DLP in place. I've got on-demand VPNs. I've got all this cool stuff I've implemented, all with one rock. I killed a lot of birds with that one rock, and it was relatively quick. Now, some of the challenges with it was, and it was actually helpful to the organization, was you had to do this kind of application rationalization type of project, like where's your data going, which also ties into CCPA and GDPR. So there's a lot tied into that, right? Because you don't want to block the applications that somebody needs to get to, but you still want to understand what's going on. You do want to block the bad stuff, right? And you want to make sure you have some configuration settings in there for whatever other guardrails that a company may have. So it's a lot of fun, and you're able to pull back the Band-Aid. It's like, ooh, what's under there? That looks interesting.
I always find like implementations, and especially with a lot of the new tools that are out there, and I'm not going to name them, but there's so many cool, I think finally there's, and we'll talk about that here in just a second, but I think finally a lot of security vendors caught up to the concept of no one wants a DOS looking UI. People really want an interactive UI that gives them the ability to dig as deep and go into as many layers as possible in order to be able to set the right policies and the parameters and so much more. That it's finally starting to come through.
Mm-hmm. And then kind of the add, I was mentioning implementation. The other one was risk modeling, but not algorithmic per se. When I was talking about a risk score, and I said like, 4 or 2 or 4, whatever. So you come up with your scoring system. You put the guardrails of that scoring system in there, and maybe use a framework like NIST CSF. I thought that was pretty easy to use. 90 or so controls, nice. And then initially, what you're going to do is you're going to want to do your first assessment on your own scoring model and say, hey, does that work or does it not work? And it works on its own and not me touching it. Which is fun. So how do I get that score to be whatever it needs to be? And I have all these tools and stuff. Well, how do I integrate that in? And that's a ton of fun, and I'm probably going to be consultant after that.
I will tell you this. I've done a risk modeling kind of project before, and I went from a risk score to a dollar value. Mm-hmm. And I found that communicated so much better with business because everyone wanted to see that. And as we were updating the kind of the algorithm that we had built into the document, like assessing our risk, the dollar value kept either increasing or decreasing. And I found that people were more attentive to security because I think a score of 1 to 10 translates well for us because we're 0s and 1 kind of guys. Like we know 4 is acceptable risk for us and 10 isn't. Right. That's why our severity scores are like 9.9 and 9.8 and, very, very similar to, I don't know if you like Barstool Sports, but Barstool's has a pizza show where the guy goes and he ranks pizza and he eats pizza all over New York, all over Brooklyn, and he scores the pizza and I love it. I actually I have the app, the Barstool's Pizza app.
That's awesome.
And whenever I travel somewhere, I'll go and see where he's been and what score he gave the pizza. Like a 7.8 is really high because he's very cheap with his scores. But a lot of times now he started to make money from this by bringing on all these different celebrities to go with him to a pizza joint and rank. And
there you go.
And so he doesn't charge the pizza place anything. You know what I mean? Like he just makes money off of sponsors. Really cool thing. And he has these celebrities, and you can tell when a celebrity's never seen it because he'll take a bite of the pizza, and it's, one bite, that's the rule. And he takes one bite of the pizza, and based on that one bite, you rank it. But then he'll take multiple more bites before he does it. And he'll be like, well, this is a 6.7. And the celebrity will be like, well, this is an 8. And it's like, you've obviously never seen my episode, right? Because we use kind of we use the diving rules here. So you can give it a 4.1 if you want, It's like the Olympic diving scale. And I felt like in security, using the Olympic diving scale didn't translate well for a lot of the organizations I was working with. And so I ended up switching it to a dollar value scale. And that started to translate. All of a sudden, your chief risk officer or your general counsel looks at it and goes, wait a minute, we have $18 million or 30 or 40 or $50 million worth of risk out there. And you're like, yep. And he goes, well, how much is it going to cost us to fix it? And you're like, probably around $2 or $3 million. They're like, let's go cut the check. Because if we can reduce our, if I got to spend $2 million to reduce my risk from 30 million to 10 million, I'm going to do that. It makes sense. And I'm not saying I'm not saying that the risk score of 4 doesn't work. I just found that translated better, at least where I've been. Not saying it's universal.
Yeah, and no, you're hitting on a really good point. When I was mentioning risk materiality before, that's one of the outcomes. I'm like, oh, okay, well, this is this, and this is what that means. It's that what that means. Like, what does that mean to legal? What does that mean to finance? What does that mean to the board when they're in the committee and they're like, well, it's our annual operating plan time, and Greg said there's just risk, and that's unacceptable. So how do we address that? Well, he presented the money and this is how much it's costing us today. If we don't fix anything, here's our potential cost.
Right.
And here's what it costs to bring it down from a critical to a high. Here's what it costs to bring that from high to whatever your next score is, and yada, yada, yada. And then you've got to include, I think what's also important is including enterprise risk management. So your enterprise risk. So the board has deemed that these 6 risks are the risk of everything, right? So how do you include that into the risk model and do the same exercise with risk materiality? Yeah. So make it meaningful. So oh, well, he is listening to us.
And he does want to make it better. And he's not looking to just randomly spend money. I think a lot of times people look at security and think that a CISO, we always blame vendors for FUD, but then we use FUD on the board. If we don't do this, then this is going to happen. It's almost ironic. I think the first time I've been guilty of doing this so many times.
I did it last time. Yeah, the cost of a data breach is this, and here's how much it costs for
all of a sudden
in the United States.
All of a sudden, you realize you're quoting sales reps from cybersecurity vendors, emails, right? And you're like, oh no, I did it. I felt and it's so easy sometimes to revert to it because it's natural human instinct when you're getting a lot of pushback to want to just throw something in someone's face. And that's not the case. That's just, you can't do that. And I mean, I still struggle with it till today. It's something I still struggle with, trying to communicate risk or not use FUD. Like, hey, if we don't do this, then we stand the risk of this happening. And I don't want to use that. I want to be able to make a clear business case. But sometimes the pushback is just so intense, and you're typically the first person that they get rid of when something bad happens. And so
you're the fall guy.
You're fighting for your job every day. Kind of talking about that though, let's kind of transition to something positive a little bit. So, what are we as security? What challenges do you see us as security practitioners starting to overcome, and what challenges do we still need to master? So let's start the first part. What challenges and issues that we were dealing with before that now we're starting to see ourselves really become much better with?
I think the challenge was getting to the boardroom was probably one of the biggest challenges, because like how do I elevate the security program? And in some ways you have to leave an organization and go into another one to increase your title, right? So, but how do I do that as an intrapreneur, not an entrepreneur, an entrepreneur within your organization, right? So that's how do I have that growth mindset inside the organization? How do I get to the board, and how do I make it meaningful? And I think today that's something that still needs to be overcome, because now we're there. Great, we're in the boardroom. Now how do I just talk about what you and I just chatted about around risk materiality, return on control, all this, all these buzzwords. I love buzzwords. All these different, terms and usage to make it meaningful for the board, because now I've got from earlier today when programming a policy within, a platform, and now I've got to go to the board and say, well, we have this score, and here's what it means to reduce this score, and here's how much it's going to cost. But that's a completely different conversation than what you had in the morning when you were typing all that stuff in. So right. I think that's going to be the challenge. I think in the foreseeable future, it's gotten a little bit easier with COVID-19, because now the board sees risk and they're asking us like, well, now I'm working from home and I noticed that this pop-up didn't happen on my laptop, but it happened in the office. So how do we fix that? I'm like, great, I have a solution for you, and here's how much it's going to cost. He's like, damn it.
I find that the whole discussion around security has changed. I think we always talk 7 layers, and I think with COVID, we've reached the 8th layer of hell, because it's
the 9 layers of hell.
Yeah. We're on the 8th layer. The 9th layer is still to come. I think wait till the fall, because I think in the second round of COVID, those who thought they were prepared are going to be unprepared. Mm-hmm. There's going to be some sort of return to some normalcy of life, and then that's going to automatically change drastically quickly. Mm-hmm. And, like the Spanish flu, the first wave was contained. The second wave was deadlier than the first wave. Yep. So the second wave of COVID-19, I think, is going to have even a greater impact. And I'm not wishing that.
It's going to provide... Yeah, you're right, because it's going to provide that false sense of security, right? It's like, Correct. Look, I stayed home for this long period of time, and then we go out, and it's like, boom, there it is again. But guess what? It's already spread around the globe. So
right. I mean, this thing started sometime in November in China, and by December it was in Japan and Korea, and by January it was in Europe, and by February it was in Western Europe and Asia and the subcontinent of Asia, and by March it was in the States. And now it's global. Now it's reaching South America and Africa and so many other spots. It's what's going to happen second. Let me ask you this, kind of as before we kind of wrap up and go into our new fire round. What do you think we do well as a security community to help each other, and what are some of your best practices that you'd like to share with the community?
Well, I think we do a really good job of talking, to our peers in the own community, whether that be at whatever level, right? I think we do a really good job of that. And I would like to challenge this group, to teach to the broader community, right? So now everyone's talking, in our own little groups, and now we're just like everyone else. All the CFOs get together, all the CEOs get together, all the CIOs get together, and now all the CISOs get together. Well, how about we, work with the other groups and provide the same level of information, if not a little bit better. Because one, you're going to improve yourself. I would apply there is you've got to get out and speak with others. You have to. You absolutely have to, because what's happening in your organization, it's not the only place it's happening. Get the understanding. Don't say something you're not supposed to say, but at least try to get help and try to get that information to you so you can better help your career within your organization. And then you become the selling point. And kind of to that point, as leaders, we've got to be able to evangelize our team. I think you've got to do it. Because everyone's working like we said, 24/7, right? We're all working. We still have our day to day to do. We have to do performance reviews and all this other stuff. Evangelize your team. Sell your team within your organization.
Empower your team.
them. There you go. Because those at some level are your inventors of security within that organization, and then you become the sellers. You become the ones that's integrated with everyone in the organization. It's huge. It's instrumental to their career, to your career, you name it, to everyone. And I think that's one of the things I first get in is like getting an understanding of knowing my team. How can I work with my team? And if you guys like the game, how do you game with your team? I don't know, whatever you want to do. But your team is your team. It's like your family. You spend a good half of your day, working with them. Well, I spend the other half with my family. So guess what? It sounds like I have two families to me. So how do you work with that team?
Yeah, it's very fascinating when you empower your team, the kind of security awareness you build within your organization. Because it's one thing for us as CISOs to go and evangelize security. It's another thing for someone in your security engineering team or infrastructure team or architecture team to go and talk to DevOps or talk to actual engineering or other people, and they're speaking a similar language and they share similar hobbies, and now they're getting beers after work, and now as things happen, there's that trust between those two people that creates a bridge to where he's going to pick up the phone before he does something and consult security because he trusts the guy. They've gone to shows, they've gotten beers, they've been to bars and pubs, and they grabbed lunch a few times, and a CISO can't do that. You gotta evangelize your CFO. You've got to evangelize your CIO, your CEO, your COO, your CMO, your chief revenue officer, your general counsel. You're at that upper level, and not in a title like we're too fancy to go down that lower level. I in fact like going down a layer or two. I think there's you learn a lot more there because you really get to the underbelly that your counterpart who's the other C level in that department isn't really going to share with you because he doesn't want his dirty context. Yeah, he doesn't want his dirty secret. Like we don't either as security folks. Like which one of us wants our security guys going and saying like, we could really, we're so susceptible to a ransomware attack. You don't understand. Like it can happen like that. And you're like, shut up. What are you doing? And
yeah, and we know what you did last night. Oh,
that's the constant thing. I mean, there's so much to it as a community. I think I will tell you this: when I started this podcast, I started it because I wanted to have these practitioner talks, and for a little while, kind of lost track of it because there's so much noise. And now that we've kind of like rebranded and come back and I've called this the CISO Talk, I really, and you being my first episode, I'm so psyched about it because I feel like this is the kind of content and conversations we really need to have more of on a wider level, because the people who are going to listen to this podcast aren't just CISOs. It's cybersecurity practitioners from all levels, from a SOC analyst to, a threat hunter. And I think as they hear more about it, they're going to start coming to us as CISOs and saying, hey, I'd really like to be a bigger part of security. Here's an idea. Let's execute it. And that's the goal.
And it's huge, right? Because now you're in a role of networking. You're connecting different groups of people together. And going back to the point and within the organization, like, hey, somebody on the team is going to meet up with somebody in DevOps, and they're having beers together. Well, now you've created security champions within the organization. So you're building, those kind of relationships, and that's key within the organization and outside of the organization. I think that's huge.
If you look at it from work from home, I think my most successful teams are the one where I've done just that. And now in quarantine, these guys are jumping on their own virtual coffee, they're on their own Slack channel, and they're talking. And so I don't have that gap that I have to worry about. Whereas in other organizations, if you're not able to really deploy it, you're really sweating it right now because you don't know what's going on. You don't know who's putting up a cloud instance where. You don't have that visibility. You're not hearing anything because you're not able to go and talk to these people and kind of figure out what they're working on. And it's very different to do a conversation on Zoom and not read someone's body language than it is to look at them at a break room or in their office or in a meeting room.
Yeah, exactly.
You tend to know how to dig more.
Dig deep, dig more. Yep.
So let's get into our CISO insight round, kind of like our fire round. So for those kind of tuning in, previously I used to kind of say, ask people 1 or 2 questions. This is essentially a 6 question fire round to get to answer by one word only. You can't say more than one if you'd like. You can.
Okay, thank you.
All right, you can. If you need to explain yourself, you can. Although on some of them I may not let you explain.
On one I will. On one I have to.
So I'm going to take us to our buzzword graveyard and have you pick one buzzword you'd get rid of forever.
So I'm going to pick 2 because they're always used together, and that's ML and AI. That drives me nuts. Anyway, sorry.
I love it. Yeah, I'll totally agree with that, and I won't dig deeper. I want to get through this round. So one technology that's going to change the way we do cybersecurity.
It's 2 words, but it's attack simulation. So the context is organizations have this annual pen test boondoggle, is what I call it. So you spin a lot of wheels getting everyone doing this pen test, and it's time consuming. Then you got to go back and fix everything. Attack simulation is an integration into the development pipeline, getting everything to the beginning, and using those security researchers to do that for you. Find the bad stuff. So attack simulation.
Last book you read?
Jim Collins, Going from Good to Great.
I actually have that book right here somewhere. It's here somewhere.
And why I like that is because it talks about disciplined people, disciplined thought, disciplined action. But what really stuck out was the flywheel and the doom wheel. And the third point in there is confront the brutal facts. That's on page 65. And because most organizations get stuck in this mindset, hey, if I get to the other side of project or whatever, it's going to be great. But, is that busy work? Or is that time what you're supposed to really be working on?
That is so very true. I have the book, and I thought I had it here, but apparently I probably have it next to my nightstand upstairs.
I'm trying to look in your shelf there. Yeah.
No, I've got some really good books here. I got a lot of cyber books, and then I've got the Lean Startup.
Mm-hmm.
I've got the Devil in the Beltway. That's a really good cyber book. Michael's a book. I had him on the podcast before. I've got Grimm's Pain, the Equifax story.
Fantastic.
I have a signed copy actually right here, right next to my computer right there. I've got people can't see it in the shot because I've organized the camera, but I have a iMac that's out of shot. And next to my iMac, I have Graham's book. It's a constant reminder for me. His book is a constant reminder to me of being prepared for a breach and not allowing yourself to be scapegoated like what he had to go through. So last movie you saw?
My Spy.
Really?
Yeah.
Why? Do you want to have
a kid?
Okay, that's fine. That's okay. Your favorite music, like it can be a band or a genre?
Genre, so 90s grudge.
90s grudge. Wow, I could totally see you in 90s grudge, man.
Well, when I had hair, it was, more meaningful, but not anymore.
Yeah, no. That is something. It's so funny because I think in cyber, like rock and metal is almost like the uniform music. I have my own music. I listen to a lot of Israeli music, which my wife absolutely hates. And she's Israeli because I listen to like what I like to call like the rap version of Israeli music, and not very frowned upon, apparently. And the final question for this insight round is one thing you took away from the COVID-19 crisis.
What happened with toilet paper? I still don't get it. Oh no, but a real takeaway is I think I mentioned it last time, that security really is the business enabler that's allowed us to get us to where we are today. We talk about digital transformation, we talk about all that stuff, but in order to get there, what are the guardrails? And that's where security comes in.
That is absolutely and so very true. Greg, I want to say thank you so much for agreeing to be my first guest on the CISO Talk. This episode is very meaningful to me because it's the beginning of executing a vision that started 2 years ago this week with this podcast. And where it's gone over the last 2 years has been absolutely it's been a great journey. I thought this was kind of a hobby. It's become a job. On top of being a CISO, this has become a job. And the interactions and the conversations are what drives us to become better and better and better. And so I'm grateful for you to share your wisdom. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I'm eternally grateful. Folks, I'm Greg McCord, Global Head of InfoSec at CalAmp. Thank you, Greg.
Thank you very much for having me, James. True pleasure.
Folks, this is not going anywhere. We've got a great episode coming to you. We're starting these with once a week. As we get more and more, we'll probably be releasing here multiple podcasts a month, maybe more than 4, 5, 6, 8, as many as we can get through talking to so many different chief information security officers and heads of InfoSec from all over. In our next episode, I am going to have an old friend of the show, Kosar Kenning from E-Trade. We're going to talk about user behavior and data analytics in cyber now in the era of work from home and how important those play into a security program and how do you get those data sets into cyber. So it's going to be a really, really cool episode. Make sure you tune in, subscribe if you haven't subscribed, and a lot more coming with that. And we've got a lineup of amazing and smart people like Greg that are going to be coming on the show. So until next time, folks, enjoy the rest of your week. And very important is to stay cyber safe.